Let's talk about the number one like setup, tree stand and hunting blind setup strategy that all bow hunters and all deer hunters alike should really know to help them consistently tag deer year after year and after year. That is interior transition zones, interior inside edges. Okay, and now what that is, what I'm trying to explain to you is an inside interior edge is an edge within the edge. Okay, so you've got your outer edges. Let's say you've got like an old cut with like waist high, chest high saplings and grasses and like new vegetation growing after like a clear cut. And you got that clear cut edge. You got like older timber like this behind me, button up to the edge of new growth, like saplings that might be chest, head high. There's your like outer edge, your outer transition zone. The interior inner edge transition zone would be back further, 20, 50, 100 yards back from that outer edge. An edge next to an outer edge. You know, the first edge transition zone is favored by doe groups, does, yearlings, younger bucks, subordinate bucks. Your big, older, mature bucks are going to favor that interior inner edge transition zone that's closer to thick cover. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when sitting up in a stand and watching does and yearlings, younger bucks come out into a field or into a cut over or a woods, an opening in the woods. Maybe you have like micro food plots within your hunting area in the woods, created an opening. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I have when hunting many times in my tree stands or blinds. I've watched does, their fawns, and younger bucks come out. No problem. Lickety splits come right out to the middle and feed, and graze. And then, but also later on, an hour later, the big buck shows up, but he's reluctant to come out into that open. The big bucks will hang up in the thicker cover and the timber. They'll stay within that inner edge, and they'll kind of stage up in there, and they might have some scrapes that they're checking. They might rub trees, tear apart trees. They may come out and nibble a little bit and graze or browse around on the inner edge of that field or that little food plot, whatever it is you're hunting on. But they're reluctant to kind of expose themselves, come way out and come out into that open area. This happens time and time again to hunters where they thought they were set up perfectly and they're waiting out. They see the does coming, their fawns, the younger bucks, and they're thinking, okay, good, all's good. And they're not winding them. The wind's perfect. You're thinking that your setup is A+, and then the mature buck shows up, but they will not step out into that open and that clearing to give you a nice shot. They'll hang up into that thicker cover, stay on the inner in that inside corner and inside the timber. But if a bow hunter or a rifle hunter or any deer hunter, if they hone in on and find those inner transition zones, those interior edges and transition zones on the back side of that outer edge transition zone, they're going to consistently tag a buck year after year after year. This is the number one tree stand and hunting blind setup strategy tip that I'm sharing with you that will help you be consistent year after year after year in tagging your buck. Because those bucks, they're going to favor that thicker inner transition zone, inner funnel, where it's like thick. You want to find these locations because the bucks will stage up in those particular areas. Don't be surprised if you go out scouting tomorrow looking for these inner edges transition zones on the interior on the 50, 100 yards inside the outer edge transition zone and find like buck scrapes and rubs coming and going through there. Don't be surprised if you find a lot of mature buck sign in those areas, because these bucks, they favor that security cover and that they favor those transition zones, those kind of funnels, those hidden funnels within the big woods to travel through. They use them as travel corridors to go from point A to point B, to go from doe group to doe group, to run their scrape lines and to rub trees and to just scent check feeding areas. The mature bucks, they'll travel these inner transition zone, inner edges on the interior side of the outer edges to like scent check the fields and food plots and cutovers and wooded clearings. They'll scent check. They'll travel downwind on those inner edges to scent check those openings for does. They'll be able to tell if there's any does near an estrus out there. They'll also travel these areas to lay down scrapes, to rub trees, and to kind of hang out in the daylight, to kind of stage there before nightfall. And then come nightfall, then the bucks will venture on out to the fields and the clearings to feed and graze, and to dog the does, chase the does around, scent check the does. Now, you're going to find in those openings, those fields, and those cutovers, scrapes and rubs, those are nighttime. That's nighttime buck sign for the most part. 90% of the time, scrapes and rubs found in like wooded clearings and clear cuts and out in fields are that sign by mature bucks is laid down after dark in the security cover of nightfall. But if a smart hunter gets back into the woods 50, 100 yards looking for these interior edges or transition zones where the security cover is, where the mature buck will feel safe to travel in daylight, a hunter could catch a mature buck on their hoof like an hour before dark, half hour before dark, and they can be consistently successful year after year after year if they kind of hone in on this type of like setup location for stands and hunting blinds and stuff like that. Great spots to ambush mature buck. And also what's like really cool about you like honing in on and finding this particular setup, an interior edge transition zone within an outer edge transition zone that's buttoned up against field, food plots, or cutovers or wooded clearing, is back there in that interior edge, you're going to have thick security cover. You're going to be able to set up your tree stand or blind back 20 yards, 25, 50 yards off of the trail, that buck trail that mature buck is traveling. And you can set up downwind. If you follow the winds, set up strategically, have an entry and exit route to not alarm any deer, to spook any deer. If you're going to hunt these type of locations, maybe hunt them mainly in the evenings, because you may access the wide open field or clearing or cutover to get into the stand or blind that's 50 yards back in the woods along the interior edge. And so maybe only focus on hunting that location in the evenings. If you're going to hunt them in the mornings, you're going to need a backdoor entry route. A morning hunting strategy would be to have a back way to enter in. You might have to park on a road on the other side of the woods and like come through the woods from the backside, and using flashlight and all, and sneaking in real quietly and carefully, getting into your stand or blind, and catch the buck coming into that inner edge off of the fields and the clearings in the mornings, maybe by 7 or 8 a.m. That buck, you might catch that buck cruising down through that inner edge that you're set up off of like 30 yards, watching that trail, watching the scrape line and rub line, and you may be able to tag your buck in the morning that way. You're going to have a back way to enter for the morning hunts. But maybe you want to just focus on hunting this particular location, this setup, in the evenings. So you can like enter through the wide open area and kind of sneak into obviously don't avoid deer. Do not travel deer trails. Do not cross deer trails. Try to have an entry point and an access point where you're not depositing human scent or disturb on deer trails and not disturbing deer trails. And then get into your blind and stand for your evening sits. If maybe that's your strategy, so you're not bumping all the deer out of your hunting area in the mornings while they're feeding and grazing and browsing around in those fields and clearings and wooded openings. Maybe do it that way. But you can be successful in hunting this type of setup in the morning by identifying a backdoor entrance, a back access that's not going to bump any deer on your way in. You've got to have that entry and exit access that's not going to alarm any deer. You do not want to have any deer knowing that you deer. And another very important tip when hunting tree stands and hunting blinds is never have a deer see you climb in or out of a tree stand, and never have a deer see you enter or leave a hunting blind. By all means, if all possible, do not let any deer see you going in and out of a tree stand or in and out of a hunting blind, because then the deer, they're going to avoid that area. They're going to see that as potential danger or potential threat. Don't let any deer, not even any mature does and your younger bucks, don't have any of them at all see you go in and out of that stand or in and out of that blind, because then the gig's up. And then don't be surprised if you do let deer see you go in and out of a tree stand or in and out of a blind. Don't be surprised if the area just dries up and you stop seeing deer. That's just your own fault for letting the deer see you go in and out of the tree and in and out of a hunting blind. That's a very important tip. You've got to remember that. Take that with you this fall when hunting your tree stands and your hunting blinds. And so, by all means, have an entry and exit access that's not going to alarm deer at all costs. You might bump deer in and out, but don't bump deer or alarm deer when going in and out of the tree stand or in and out of your blind. It's okay to maybe bump deer like 50, 100 yards away from your blind and your tree stand. At least the deer didn't see you go in the stand or see you going in and out of the blind, and they don't think of that stand area or that blind area as a threat. The deer won't avoid that area, but they might like remember some that a little bit that they were spooked or alarmed or saw a human in that particular location that you were when you were traveling through the woods. They may avoid that part of the woods, but at least they're not going to avoid your tree stand or your hunting blind area, because you didn't let deer see you go in and out of your stand or in and out of your blind, did you? You do not, by all means, don't let that happen. If you hone in on an area like that, an interior edge or transition zone within an outer edge or transition zone, that inner edge or inner transition zone that you find that has real thick back wall cover, and it's a nice little funnel going through the woods, a strip of thick cover, like thick alders and thick hemlock, pine, conifer trees, or if it's like a real thick area, that's in a sense a funnel, a hidden funnel within the woods, and that has an interior edge transition zone. And a lot of times an area like that's buttoned up to like swampland or wetland or lowland. Also great potential bedding cover for mature bucks.